afternoon. The students receiving doctoral degrees today are at the finish line of the academic marathon. They began with 2 years of grueling coursework and do-or-die comprehensive exams. Then came the hard part, coming up with original research ideas, executing a research plan, and writing a dissertation. To honor the achievement of these students, I'm going to say a few words about their research as they receive the hoods that signify their new status as PhD economists. Hei-Sing Chen, or as we know him, Ron Chan, has written a thesis in environmental economics. He studies the cost effectiveness of the acid rain program, a cap and trade system for regulating sulfur dioxide emissions that was in place between 1995 and 2010. In principle, allowing power plants to buy and sell emission permits among themselves is more cost-effective than simply imposing uniform emission limits on all power plants, because it allows the cleanest plants to profit from shouldering more of the burden of emission reductions. Ron finds that the acid rain program did save money relative to uniform emission limits, but by much less than had been projected back in 1995. Ron is being hooded by his lead advisor, Professor Maureen Cropper. Leland Dodd-Crane's thesis is in macroeconomics and labor economics. He examines census data linking individual workers to the firms they work for over time, and shows that a given firm tends to hire more productive workers when they are growing quickly than when they're growing slowly. Leland interprets this result as evidence of assortative matching in labor markets, in that better firms tend to hire better workers. And he shows that this can be good for the economy if worker and firm quality are complementary in the production process. Leland is being hooded by his lead advisor, Professor John Haltiwanger. Lauren Michelle Deason's thesis is in international trade. She studies the impact of uncertainty about future trade policy on the current flows of international trade. She applies her model to the US-Chile Free Trade Agreement of 2003, which reduced actual tariffs on some Chilean goods entering the United States, and also reduced uncertainty by making it less likely that the US would raise tariffs in the future. She finds that the reduction in tariff uncertainty accounts for a substantial fraction of the overall increase in exports from Chile to the US that occurred after 2003. All I know is that if it means that I can eat more Chilean sea bass, it's all good. Lauren is being hooded by her lead advisor, Professor Nuno Lamau. Matija Janček's thesis is in the economics of institutions. Previous research has shown that people's level of trust in their political institutions has important impacts on social stability. But why is trust higher in some parts of the world than others? Matija looks at the impact of historical changes in political borders on current levels of trust in 6 countries in Central and Eastern Europe that historically were tossed around like a hot potato between the Russian, the Ottoman, and the Austro-Hungarian empires. Comparing different regions of the same country, Matija finds that people from regions with fewer border changes over the last 500 years show less trust in political institutions today than people from more stable regions. I would note that Ukraine is part of Matija's sample, so I guess he's going to need to update his data set. Matija is being hooded today by one of his advisors, Professor Ethan Kaplan. Tara Call's thesis is in development economics. She studies the impact of a food security program in India that subsidizes household purchases of grains like rice and wheat. She finds that the program does lead to higher caloric intake among the affected families, partly because families consume more grains, but even more so because households take the money that they save on grains and use it to spend more on other kinds of food. Tara is being hooded today by one of her lead advisors, Professor Jessica Goldberg. Alvaro La Parra Perez thesis is in economic history. Alvaro studies the history of the Second Spanish Republic, which collapsed and was replaced by the nationalist dictatorship of Francisco Franco after the Spanish Civil War of the 1930s. Previous analysts have cast Spain's army as a monolithic supporter of Franco's nationalists. But Alvaro tracks the careers and loyalty of Spanish officers from 1910 to 1936, and he shows that many officers supported the Republic, especially those who had enjoyed more promotions or who were from units that got more resources under the Republic. Alvaro is being hooded today by his lead advisor, Professor John Wallace. Qian Lu's thesis is also in economic history. Qian studies the links between the political and financial systems in Massachusetts prior to the Civil War. He shows that for a 40-year period after the American Revolution, Massachusetts had what we would call a partisan banking system, in which only people from the political party currently in power in the state of Massachusetts were allowed to open banks, and banks mostly served businessmen who were from the same political party. Qian shows how this partisan system eventually gave way before the Civil War to a free banking system in which banks served the general public and anybody who had enough capital could open a bank. Qian is being hooded today by his lead advisor, Professor John Wallace. Alvaro Pedraz's thesis is in macroeconomics and finance. Alvaro studies the portfolio choices of state-approved pension fund managers in Colombia. These managers are subject to a minimum return guarantee, whereby if the fund's returns fall too far below the average industry return, the fund managers are required to make up the difference out of their own pockets. Alvaro shows that this guarantee causes herding among fund managers, in that less successful managers mimic the portfolio choices of the more successful managers to make sure that they don't fall too far behind in order to trigger the minimum return guarantee. It's too bad that Bernie Madoff is not Colombian. I am one of Alvaro's lead advisors, and it is my pleasure to hood him today. Maria Fernanda Prada's thesis is in labor economics. Existing research has demonstrated that both cognitive and socio-emotional ability lead to higher wages and educational attainment. Maria's thesis identifies a third dimension of ability, which she labels mechanical ability. Think of a good plumber or a car mechanic. Maria shows that mechanical ability leads to higher wages, just like cognitive or socio-emotional ability. However, unlike other kinds of ability, Maria shows that people with high mechanical ability should not go to a 4-year college. They can make more money over their lifetime by going straight into work out of high school or maybe going to a technical school. So, a few of you out there may have just wasted 4 years. Sorry about that. Maria is being hooded today by one of her advisors, Professor Soo-Hyung Lee. Juan Pedro Trevino's thesis is in international finance. He studies how the adoption of an inflation targeting regime changed the conduct of monetary policy in Mexico. He finds that following the advent of inflation targeting, Mexico's central bank paid less attention to the nominal exchange rate when setting monetary policy and paid more attention to Mexico's output and policy credibility. I am one of Juan's advisors, and it is my pleasure to hood him. Shu-Lin Lee's thesis is in macroeconomics. She studies young workers who enter the job market during a time of high unemployment, such as the recent Great Recession. She finds that such workers suffer long-term wage losses relative to workers who enter the job market during a boom. And she finds that this is because entering the labor market during a recession makes it harder to try out different careers early in your working life, so that workers are less likely to find the career that fits them best if they enter the labor market at the wrong time. Shu-Lin is being hooded today by one of her lead advisors, Professor John Haltowian. Hai-Shan Yuan's thesis is in political economy. Hai-Shan explores a quirky feature of Japan's political system in which some electoral districts get an extra representative in parliament if their election runner-up performs well enough relative to the election winner. Hai-Shan finds that cities and towns that are located in these lucky districts get more funds from the central government, and that this effect is concentrated in public infrastructure spending like roads. Interestingly, this extra pork mostly flows to cities and towns that strongly support either the election winner or the election runner-up, not to swing towns whose votes are more split evenly between the two candidates. Hai-Shan is being hooded today by his lead advisor, Professor Ethan Kapp. And finally, we have 8 students today who are receiving a master's in professional studies in applied economics. This is a relatively new program. It was launched by our department in fall of 2012. The program is designed to help prepare students for policy, research, and analysis jobs in the government, private sector consulting, or non-government organizations such as the Federal Reserve. The students getting degrees today have taken 10 courses in economic theory, applied econometrics, and topics relevant to public policy such as environmental economics, market design, and health economics. This is a nighttime program that can be completed in as little as 15 months, even if you're working full-time during the day. So if you're getting your bachelor's degree today and you think this sounds interesting, you should check us out on the web. Today, the students receiving their degrees are Rukayan Akimbi, Francis Avendama, William Clayton, Timothy Lee, Larry Lee, Jonathan Morandure, Tyron Riojas, and Fen Wei. Please join me in congratulating our PhD and master's recipients.